Right, so there's three types. There's people who are in on the ground floor who plan the whole thing. There's people who they co-opt to help them, maybe paying them high commissions, or just, people who go along with it. They're not the brains of the operation. They're going along with the plan. And then there's a third type of people who probably won't work for the organisation, probably won't be agents of the organisation, so they won't be like the solicitors from the start who they know are bent and will go along with anything. What happens is these are the people who see a Ponzi scheme or a fraud going on and they know the score. So what they'll do is, let's say one of the victims goes to them, or a group of the victims goes to them and says, I've got a problem with these people, I think they've ripped me off. I think these solicitors should have done this and should have done that and should have done the other. What they'll do is go, oh yes, I think they should have, this is very bad, blah, 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 we've got a very good case against them. The next thing what they'll do is they'll be on, more likely than not, they'll be on the blower to the criminal solicitor saying, look, these people are trying to sue you. We've taken the commission on. We're going to have them for a right load of money, and we're going to spin it out for a couple of years, charge them as much as possible, and we won't so much as put a dink on your professional indemnity insurance. So don't worry about it. It will be fine. We will take care of it. We'll take them to the cleaners though. So you've got three different types now. In the Aston Lloyd Ponzi scheme, there's several parasitic elements of the third type. But you see a lot of people say, oh, no, you can't say that they've done anything wrong. They fucking well definitely have, right? What they do is they've been taken on by victims of the crime, and then what they've done is they've led the people down the garden path, run out statutory time limits, even got barristers' opinions against the criminal solicitors, Coleman CCTS, are the criminals who ran the Aston Lloyd Ponzi scheme, and have run subsequent frauds, like, for instance, there's one called AH or MH Carbon, which has now been closed down, which was like carbon trading. They're always scams. Carbon trading is always scams. I mean, obviously, global warming is a scam. The concept of fossil fuels is a scam. It's a marketing tool. The concept was made up years ago to make out fossils, because fossils are rare, to make out it's rare when there's an overabundance of oil. So anything to do with that, it's always going to be a scam underlyingly anyway. And anybody who's stupid enough to think that that's a good investment, is just, they're just idiots. They're just begging to be robbed. But the point is, Coleman's were so confident in the corruption of the system that they continued from their Kingston office to do frauds with the very same fraudsters who'd done the Aston Lloyd frauds, and they were quite happy, considering Aston Lloyd first started off with quite tangible things like buildings, then it turned into shares in hotels, then it turned into Ukraine land and shares of wheat and hiring it off the farms and having a profit share, and then it turned into Jatropha biofuels, which is obviously fairy dust, a load of bullshit. So it got increasingly less realistic as they took more money in, and the type of people who were investing, the people who were putting the money in, they were going from people who were buying tangible things to investing in kind of stuff that was just like a fancy piece of paper with some squiggly lines saying certificate, and they were just buying it, and they're just complete morons. A lot of these people, unfortunately, not their fault, not to be, don't deride them too much. They're just idiots. It's just like, a dog's a dog. They're not that clever. A cat's a cat. These are morons. That's it. That's what they are. They're retards. It's not their fault. The point is, anyway, so in the instance of this, you had one particular solicitor based in the West Country in England called Batten Solicitors. Now, Batten Solicitors were approached by somebody. Well, I believe they're approached by this guy, and I know his name, but I won't name his name. Now, they made a right fool of him, and they made him look very bad. Now, I'm not sure whether he contacted them or whether someone recommended them or whatever. But anyway, this guy gave a lot of other people the impression that he'd spoken to this firm, and he knew them really well, and that they were great, and they were going to really sort this Coleman CTTS out. So there's this woman called Seri Stevens, spelled C-E-R, like that's how it's Seri. It's a bit Sherry, not, but it is Seri. Seri Stevens, right? And this solicitor led them down the garden path, and she came out with this sort of plan of all these things she was going to do. It's a bit weird, because normally, if you don't know what's going to happen off the other side and you're going to take an action against them, you don't decide exactly what you're going to do from the start. And what she did eventually, after she'd reviewed the paperwork, right, that's what apparently, it cost a lot of money to do this. She came up with a plan of writing 3 letters to them. Now, each of the letters would ask them different things, and it wasn't like, we'll ask them that, then that will catch them out, then we'll ask them that, that will catch them out, we'll draw them in this. It wasn't like, it was literally something like, We'll ask them what colour socks they'll wear. Then we'll ask them what colour boxer shorts you're wearing, and then what colour vest you're wearing. It was kind of like things that could have all been written on one letter. So why would you space them out? Completely and utterly ridiculous. And she was making various promises, which I'll go into in more details in another video. But for instance, one of them was she'd make sure she rattled their cages and she'd get their professional indemnity insurers on the go. Now, Coleman CCTS's insurers had already been notified, and they were already on the go because I'd already got them on the go, and I'd just done it all myself for free, right? So she's going through all this stuff she's going to do, and she's talking about it like it's all this really fancy stuff, and she's banging on about council opinion. Council said this, council said. They always use these ridiculous, highfalutin, wankery words. It's meaningless, right? And what happened was she didn't even put their professional indemnity insurance on notice. She didn't complain to the SRA about them, even though they'd done serious impropriety. She could have done all that for free, and she's actually obliged to do that as a matter of, like, you know, well, no solicitors ever do what they're meant to do, but in the actual guidelines or whatever you call it, in the code of conduct or whatever it is for solicitors, they're meant to tell them anyway. She didn't do any of that stuff. So it wasn't like she didn't want to draw them down into the court arena and start costing them a lot of money. This is all free stuff she could have easily done. She didn't do it. Then what she did, she paid this barrister to give an opinion. Right now, when a solicitor gets a barrister to give an opinion, they have to instruct them what they want the opinion to be based on. Now, the thing with this is, so you can't necessarily blame the barrister if he gives a shit advice, right? Because it could be that he's actually been asked to give advice on a very narrow thing, and he's not told about this, he's not told about that, he's told, this is what we want you to give the opinion on. Now, the thing that made me very suspicious when I read this opinion was he basically came to the conclusion that they had no case against solicitor, which was utter bollocks, right? The SRA, the Solicitors Regulation Authority, don't believe this, and neither does anybody else who's, you know, not completely bent. Now, giving this barrister the benefit of the doubt, he's either a complete idiot, which I don't think he probably is. He might be an idiot, but he can't be that stupid, because what he also started doing is he started giving like vicarious advice. Like he was saying, but what you should do is you should take the firm to court that, you know, like the actual criminal firm, if you like, as opposed to the criminal solicitors. But they're targeting the action against solicitors, and they've been told by Batten's Seri Stevens that they've got a case against the solicitors. Then all of a sudden she just sort of like, without any excuse for the sea change, about a year later, 18 months later, she completely changed it. She says she's got no case whatsoever, but she can't explain why they would have had a case before. What had changed? Nothing had changed. They still had a case, and she basically completely ripped them off. And this is the incredible thing that she managed to do. This is what happens when people have got herd mentality and they've been fucked around. They start acting like complete imbeciles. To start off with, there was a group of, say like 8 people, 7 people, something like that. Then what happened later on was, even when she said they got no chance, these people were so sort of like Stockholm Syndrome. They were so keen to be in this little action that they then proceeded to tout for more business off other people, even though she said they don't have a case, yeah? And she got more people to start paying in money. Now, the other thing with these people, what they often do, is they'll say, I've got to do this work, and this will cost me, say, £1,000 for each of you 5. But then as they get more people into the group, even though they're not doing any more work, they keep having to pay £1,000. But there's no more work, so why do they have to keep paying £1,000? And if you're looking for settlement of, like, you know, settlement amounts and stuff like that, and you want to remember this list is meant to be looking out for your interest. They're the agent, you're the principal. It's not for them to get more people on board, but they often do. Or they'll try and get one of the more naive parties to get more people on board. And the next thing, let's say there was 5 of you, the next thing will be 15 of you, and you won't know there's 15, and then all of a sudden there'll be a letter and you'll see that there's 15 names, or an email with 15, and you'll be like, hang on a minute, where did they come from? So that basically cut the settlement amount into a third. So you see, they keep changing the basis upon which they act for you. Now, as I said, in terms of the thin end of the wedge, Battens, I believe, are sort of like they're one of these parties that's come along after the event. I'm absolutely positive, in my own mind, I've got no proof of this, and it will never be able to be proved, well, probably not, that they will have contacted Coleman and said, look, don't worry, we're going to fuck these lot off, we're going to take all their money, we're going to take them to cleaners, and we're just going to completely rip them off. They're complete suckers. Don't worry, it's sound. We would never actually take an action against a big firm like yours because we know you're going to cause us problems, and we would hope you wouldn't do the same thing to us. That's absolutely definitely what's happened. But the point is, what you can prove is the actions that they've taken are just, they have no logic, they have no theme. They're totally contra to what they promised to do. They have that, if you're an accident theorist, right, which a lot of people are, if all the accidents go in the favour of one particular party, with none of them deviating the other way, and there's about 25 of them, major ones, out of, say, 30 things that they could have done right, they did 25 of them wrong, and then the other 5 things they didn't do anything, you've got to realise that on a balance of probability means that those people are acting in a way against those people deliberately, because nothing, in life, coincidences don't always go the same way. And you've got to realise that if you analyse it in terms of mathematical terms, probability, like, if I was tossing coins, the idea that I'd toss 10 heads on the trot, it's virtually impossible to do that. Yeah, it's very, very unlikely. If I was to toss like 360 heads on the trot, it's like, it's the figure against one would be like more than all the grain of sand in all the rest of the whole universe. You know what I mean? It's virtually impossible. So you have actually got, when you take each thing on its own merit, you can think they're completely incompetent, which is negligence anyway. In a civil capacity, they're still liable. You've got that. Then you've got the fact that if they are just not maliciously doing it, not criminally conspiring against you, you can say on each point, well, maybe they're just fucking completely stupid or something like that. That you can say that, but the point is, if they do it for like 25 out of 30 points, and they don't even bother dealing with the other points, you've got to say, like the actual real balance of probability, it's beyond the balance of probability. It's actually beyond reasonable doubt, because reasonable doubt doesn't run into millions and millions and millions and millions to one, which is exactly what it is. Anyway, without reading through all of the paperwork they produced and this barrister's opinion, and I've seen lots of barrister's opinion in the past, I wouldn't want to get into too much depth of detail, but I'm quite happy to, and I am intending to do this. But at this stage, just think of it like this. You've got ALPonz, so you've got the different subsidiaries in ALPonz. You've got the agents who were dealing with them at the start, so you've got marketing. You've got the law, the legal section, so it's an outside entity, and then you've got the accountancy function. All 3 of these are bent. So you've got Obelisk International doing the marketing, you've got Coleman CTTS doing the legal work, most of it. There's some notary work done in other countries, and then you've got KBSP Partnership doing the accounting and signing off fraudulent accounts for the whole group, that holding company and the other parts of the group. Those functions are all part of what I would say are ALPonz. You've got Aston Lloyd Holdings PLC, all of the different companies within it, like Alpil, which did the land, Ukraine land investments, and you've got the Biotropa fairy dust biofuels in Africa. They'd be the different subsidiaries, and you've got Aston Lloyd Sophia Hotel, where you bought shares in a hotel or something. They would all be in there. And again, on the outside of that, you've got the sales agents, you've got the solicitors, who do the conveyancing or not, whichever the case may be, depending on how you look at it and depending who they're telling the story to. And then you've got the accountancy function to sign off bent books. So all of those are instrumental, and all of those, without any question of a doubt, are involved. But a lot of people will say, no, you can't say they're involved with a different company. It's complete idiocy, because you're not allowed to pay. You can't contract out of the law. That's the expression. You cannot contract out of the law. Look, the ridiculousness of it is, if I wanted to rob a bank in England now, if I hired a solicitor to drive the car, and a solicitor to go in and hold a bag, and another one to go in and put notes into the bag, and another one to go in with a gun, the amount of idiots in this country who would say, oh, no, it's fine because they're solicitors, they were just doing what you told them to. It's illegal. And you know what the next thing would happen? The police would come down and they'd say, call the Solicitors Regulation Authority, we can't do anything, we've been told not to. That's the kind of nonsense you're going to come up against. So you've got two variables there. This concept that law enforcement in England has got nothing to do with crime and it's got everything to do with regulation. These bodies aren't regulatory bodies because they've got no power in most instances, and even the powers that they do have, they don't ever actually go through with them. So you get people who are just repeat offenders, never pay any attention to anything they're told. They never get kicked off the books. Right now, I in the past used to pay my subs to the RICS as a quantity surveyor. There's different types of surveyors who are all chartered by the RICS. Now, I've got the card. You know what? I am a NRICS, that's member of the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors. I don't pay the fees, so they get annoyed if I put NRICS after my name. Right now, it's funny because it does link back into this. A while ago, the head of the RICS, I don't know his name. I'm not one of these people who's really interested in the organisation. I realised it was just a money spinning thing mainly. Basically, the way it works is it used to actually be very hard to get into it. Then it gets very easy, and then it gets very hard because when people stop going into it because it's too hard, they just think, fuck, we've got no new members, so they make it really, really easy. So it's a bit of a joke. But at the same time, depending on when you did the test, it could have been like one of the hardest things you'd ever do in your whole life. So a lot of the people are very resentful of the fact that if people have got a good job and they're not in it, you can see how it works. And of course, if people get in and they go, well, what were the questions they asked you on the test? And then they write them all out, show the answers, they realise all the answers are wrong, they still let them in. Can you imagine how angry that would make you? Extremely angry. But anyway, the leader, the boss of the RICS, the RICS, that's the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, had been caught sort of diddling his tax. So he'd been putting things through on his personal tax, or so, I don't know what he'd been doing, but he'd been diddling his tax in a very obvious manner. And he'd been running a business, putting expenses through that shouldn't have been expenses, all sorts of stuff. And it turns out that, just like with the Solicitors Regulation Authority, let's say you stole something. They won't call it stealing, they'll call it something else like dishonesty or something. And it was something like that with the RICS. So under their code of conduct, he'd been caught doing dishonesty in the past. Now, of course, being a regulatory body, you'd have thought that they would have told the police about this. But no, they caught him, had a kind of secret tribunal no one was about to talk about. No doubt they get kicked out of the RICS and lose their job if they talked about any of it. And they let him off. Then he was still the boss. Then he got caught doing it again and eventually got leaked out. But this is the whole point. All these regulatory bodies are run by crooks. They all are. It's a consistent theme. And because they've got royal attached to them, especially, if they've got royal attached to them, the courts won't touch them because it's all to do with the crown and they're kind of allowed to steal and rob, like the Freemasons. It's kind of like the Duke of Kent runs the Freemasons, so therefore you're allowed to steal, like a privateer's license, a piracy license or a license to kill. If you're a secret agent, you shot your next door neighbour and you've got a license to kill, they'd probably let you off. They just go, oh, come on, he's just killed one person, it's fine. This is the way it works. But the point is, with the Solicitors Regulation Authority, when they catch one of these people doing something wrong, they're not going to do anything about it. They'll make a big hullabaloo about it. They'll do things like trying to run down the timescales. They won't say, look, this guy's stolen from you, you need to call the police. They'll just fanny around, do absolutely nothing, and they'll spin out years of time, at which time statutory time limits will go down and stuff like that. Records will be allowed to be destroyed. The whole thing is just an exercise in creating a smokescreen. And effectively, at the same time, they are really the trade unions of these respective professions because they are paying their wages. That's how it works. Bizarrely, in England, also there's a crossover because some of these things are paid for by a private interest group. Like, the Solicitors Regulation Authority, at least it's consistent. All solicitors pay into it. And the bar is paid for by barristers. All of them have to pay into it. But with accountancy, you've got all different organisations, and it's just, like say the ACCA, they're like not, is it ACCCA? I forget anyway. The point is they're considered to be much lower than the other ones. They'll let anyone in. There's still lots of tests and bullshit to make out it's difficult, but it's not as difficult as the other ones. They don't have such stringent rules. So, you see, they basically exist to just fanny you around if you ever complain about anyone. And the only time when they start to really raise their game is when they realise the police are involved. And they're going to have to explain why for like the last 3 years when they had all the evidence, they never did anything about it. So it is worth talking to them, but you've just got to make sure it's on your terms. You don't want to be filling out any of their ridiculous claim forms. What you want to do is say, that's your rule. It says in that rule they're not allowed to do that. Look, this bit of paperwork proves that person did this, they did this, they did this, they did this, they've been asked about this. They haven't done any of that. What are you going to do about it? I'm not filling out a complaint form. Do you see what I'm trying to say? And you put that on the record and then send it recorded delivery. Make sure they get it. Record get the recorded delivery stamp, scan it, email it to them with the letter on the email, so they know before they get it through the post that you've already sent it. Because they'll try and pretend they never got it. They're devils for doing it. The police have fucking love doing this as well. So you've got to be very careful about forcing information on people so they can't pretend they didn't get it. Now, that's the way it works with these various parasite entities which float around any Ponzi scheme. You've got to kind of deal with them. Unfortunately, you do in some ways have to deal with a regulator. Sometimes you can get some useful information out of them. For instance, one of the things is they often contradict themselves. So they'll say one thing thinking they can fob you off easily, but in what they're saying, they'll give something away because they're trying to collude with the offending party to come out with some kind of logistical logic behind the answer they're giving, but that answer will just be a slapdash one to get rid of you, and often they'll want to change that later. So it's useful in that way, but they've got to remember that if you go to a court context, the judge doesn't give a fuck what the regulatory body said. If the regulatory body's told you to go away and then you've taken them to court without any new information and you haven't proved what they said is wrong, then they'll make a big fuss of it. But if you've just proved that they lied to their regulator, the judge doesn't give a fuck. So there's not really any point to use them for what you would think you'd use them for. You're just using them to try and catch them out because they're completely bent, and it's a guarantee they'll do something they shouldn't, and you might catch them out. The other thing you've got to remember is if you're a regulatory body, you don't go to the solicitor and say, right, or say solicitor, accountant, say, look, he's got you banged to right town, we're going to swerve this. You go, oh right, yeah, so you did this, oh right, so you told them that but you didn't, oh right, well that's the same thing, blah blah blah. They'll be kind of soft with them. So they won't be like interrogating them and going like, look, we're going to practice what's going to happen if you end up, being up in a criminal charges for this. They won't do that. And because solicitors and accountants and stuff have a very easy life most of the time, when they get these questions, they're just going to fob them off like, oh yes, I just did this. I was trying to do a good job. I don't know why they were complaining, you see. So that's what they'll do. And so they get a soft touch. And the people who work for the regulatory bodies aren't necessarily professionally qualified in these qualifications anyway, so they don't necessarily even know what they're doing. So they are. It's a bit like if you're dealing with the police and the police are trying to cover something up. You're dealing often with like people who've got IQs of like 75, stuff like that. They're not educated. They can hardly read and write. Not all of them, but the ones that will be used by the criminals to because they're easy to manipulate. The ones that they'll try and co-opt. They will always drop the ball because they're fuck-ups. Do you know what I mean? If you got them to mow the lawn, they fucking run over the wire and electrocute themselves, or they fucking run your dog over in its basket in the kitchen. They're idiots. They will always fuck something up. If they're involved with it, they will fuck something up. So it doesn't matter how well-oiled the plan is. As soon as you involve the police, they will fuck something up. So you've got your centre conspiratorial scheme, which is always compartmentalised into different firms. So they can sort of say, oh no, it wasn't me at that firm, it was that at that firm, and they switch money around, and so they can close one and keep the others open. They're not allowed to, but they'll get bent insolvency practitioners to do it who will allow them to do it, and they'll say, well, it wasn't my fault, the insolvency practitioners did it. But you've got these other parasitic entities right now. With Aston Lloyd, obviously you've got KBSP partnership. They signed off the 2009 Companies House accounts. They allowed a guy called Robert Wing to take 0.3 million, so that's £300,000 out of the profits, but there were no profits. So that was fraud. They did double accounting, so they counted money that had been earned from selling things to clients, such as me, such as land in Tuzla Lake. They then counted that as a company asset, but they also considered the money I paid for it to be company money, like profit, but it's not profit because I paid for that thing. That's mine now. So you see, so what they were doing is these people, I haven't really studied the Companies House accounts, but I know they're bent and other people have looked at them. But I mean, look, 2 and 2 equals 4. Look, if you say they're company assets, it's not company assets, and you put it down on the thing and say that it's a profit as well. I don't even really need to look at it. I know a lot of people have told me how it works. How on earth could they have possibly signed the accounts off? Because it was a full Companies House audit, not just what's colloquially called an audit. It was a full audit. That means the accountant looks through every single thing and rationalises it. It's not like when you're doing a window cleaner's books and he just says, right, well, he's a sole trader or a small limited company. They just basically tell their accountant this, that, and the other. Accountant goes, yeah, that sounds all right. And if they get a tax audit from the Inland Revenue, they kind of have to look into it a bit more. But generally speaking, they just put something through that looks okay. And if the tax man thinks it's fine, a few years later it'll all be forgotten about because the tax man thinks they've got enough money. There's no point going into massive detail. This was a full audit, right? KBSB in writing, the idiots have even said that if it's a PLC that they're auditing, now Aston Lloyd Holdings PLC obviously is a PLC. They're not meant to do the whole thing with one person. They're meant to use different people to do the marketing and various other different aspects of it. Like the different subsidiaries are meant to be audited by different people, I believe. I forget the details, but anyway, they kind of admitted doing another thing quite minor, but that they'd actually done wrong. But they're so off the ball because they're just putting through figures that just don't make any sense that are then going to be published, that they're actually liable for, but they pretend that they're not. And this is the point, is that people are so ignorant. These people can basically go around doing daylight robbery, and people think, well, he's an accountant, so what would I know? Now, when I phoned up KPSB, I actually did record the call, and this was after me sending them a few emails. Now, basically, to start off with, they're very sarcastic, sort of mock charm, but you could see through it. And then they started sort of making out I was so inarticulate and such an idiot, they couldn't even understand what I was talking about. Then they were saying it was very strange. No, sorry, before that, they were saying it was very strange. They didn't understand what I was saying. And they said, we'd rather not converse in emails. And I was like, well, I don't care what you think. I'd rather have it on the record. And then the next thing, they're like, we just won't be dealing with you anymore. The next thing, I said, right, put your insurers on notice. And they're like, sorry, we're taking everything you say extremely seriously. And I'm like, have you put them on notice? They're like, we can confirm you put them on notice. See, this is the way you've got to deal with them. You've got to realise there's certain little strings you can pull. You pull those little strings. Professional indemnity insurance is the big one. It is the big one, because as soon as you pull that particular string, they have to come out with two lots of bullshit. The bullshit they're giving you and the bullshit they're giving their insurers, because their insurers will, get a solicitor to start speaking to them, I believe, probably something like that. If it's a solicitor's company, it definitely will be a solicitor straight away. And they have to come up with a cock and bull story for them to protect them against insurers and one against you. But then the solicitor who's working for the insurer will take over. That solicitor will then start writing to you on their behalf. So they've got to give one lot of bollocks to them, one lot of bollocks to you, but the bollocks that they're giving to them can't be massively different from what they've already told you, because you might get back to, so it makes it more difficult right now. When you involve other parties, such as the police might come along, they've got another lot of people who've got to give a load of bollocks. Now, the police are obviously in their pockets. The police aren't going to do anything that's going to cause them any problems. But the point is, this is good, because then they've got the temptation to give them a load of bollocks. And because the police will always send some complete imbecile down there who knows nothing about anything, because that's what they do so that no white-collar criminals will ever get prosecuted for anything. That person's so stupid that they will literally be tempted to just say anything to them because they're just idiots. They're not going to send an intelligent person down there. They can send a complete idiot, yeah? So this idiot, it's much more tempting to tell them just absolutely anything right now. So in a conventional sense, you've got the solicitor who works for the insurance. Now, obviously, the solicitor who works for the insurance, he knows or she knows that they're probably doing something bent, right? And they'll probably know quite a lot about the kind of things they do bent. However, they also know that as to stay in business as an insurance company, they don't want to be ringing a red flag. If they think that firm can get away with doing something bent, they'll probably let them get away with it. Do you see what I mean? So they've got 3 different characters they're dealing with, and each character has a different modus operandi, a different level of knowledge. Normally that solicitor will probably know the most about things. The victim, if you like, will know the least. And will know not much, but they'll know they're getting fucked about with, because otherwise they wouldn't have managed to get to that stage. And the police will just be some fucking dribbling idiot who will just be like sucking up to them, having no idea about anything, and they'll just be going on about a load of irrelevance. So you see, the temptation is, because if you deal with 3 different people, let's say you were telling them about your day at work or a football match you watched, you tell the different people different things. Like if you were talking to a 3-year-old kid, you wouldn't start going on about some player that you didn't like and this, that and the other. If you're talking to somebody who knew a lot about football or was really into it, you might say, oh, that so-and-so's a dirty player, blah, blah, blah. It's quite amusing. He got away with doing this. I've seen him elbow someone in the ribs and, you got away with it, you look where the lines are, you got them, and you sort of say, it's quite funny. You tell them that, something like that, and then there'd be like some old granny, you tell them something else, like you just say, oh, you know the kind of thing. And this is the whole way. So you want to play these parties off against each other. It's very, very important. But the thing with all this stuff is it takes a long time, and you've got to keep plugging at it, and then eventually the dividends start paying off because you start seeing the cracks appear. But the only way you can get the cracks to appear is to keep putting the pressure on. And you've got to realise that with all things in life, first of all, they'll ridicule you. First of all, they'll get angry with you. Second of all, they'll get angry with you. And third of all, they'll agree that it was inevitable that what you said was true from the beginning and there was no question that what you said was right. Now, that's the same with all degrees of knowledge. So what I've known from day one, which was like back in probably... I started realising things were up a very long time ago, but there's not really much I could do about it. But in 2010, in October, when I heard the thing gone into administration, I knew I was going to get the runaround by the police. Now, I had an architect staying with me, hasn't been doing architecture for a long time, and he said, look, I've dealt with a similar situation in Turkey. He said, look, I guarantee you the police will get involved at some stage. Best you get them involved, so then they can't say they didn't know anything about it. He says, no doubt lots of other people have told them. He said they'll be doing anything not to get involved. And he said they'll definitely get in on it and they'll be trying to fucking sink any investigation. So what you've got to do is you've got to get everything on the record. You've got to make sure they get that information because they'll do anything not to get the information. And he said they'll get very angry when they realise you know what they're up to and you force the information on them. But they'll pretend not to be, but they'll get very angry. But they're still so like pig ignorant and sort of so cocksure themselves that they still won't realise that you're setting them up, because in the future you've just got to make sure you remember from day one you got the police and you made them investigate it. So what it was, I did the exact same things we said. He also said the insolvency practitioners will be in on it. He said they'll either be court appointed, in which case they'll get in on it, or it'll be a voluntary liquidation. And he said that the chances are they'll end up selling the property back to the people who had it in the first place, and they'll just chop you out. And he actually said probably they'll end up paying you some pennies on the pound. But in this instance, they didn't even do that, or they tried not to. So you see, every single thing he said was completely right. And he gave this assessment of what would happen and how it would work in about 3 seconds. Now, he wasn't familiar with this job. I just explained it to him. I told him scant details. The whole point with this, right, there is no genius involved. There is a formula. The formula gets followed with certain little twists. And once you understand how these people do these things, it's just like sort of waking up in the morning and seeing the sun. You know, I mean, if you'd never seen the sun before because you'd never been looking out the window, probably think, what's that big thing in the sky? You know, this is the point. It's inevitable. These things always happen. They always try it on. The formula happens again and again and again and again and again. And for anybody who's watching this, if you come across any of these problems in the future, you've just got to make sure you follow the formula, which will get you where you want to be. Right now, I'll digress slightly, but you'll see how this is very related. There's a guy recently, probably 2 or 3 years ago, who got on the wrong side of somebody who the City of London police were friendly with. And the next thing he knew, he had the terrorism branch, the robbery branch, the murder branch, all the different squads from the City of London police and various other police forces, possibly, I don't know, spending masses and masses and masses and masses of money trying to fit him up, saying he was a drug dealer and saying he was a terrorist, right? They raided his house, armed police, raided his accountant's house, his financial advisor, his business, caused him all sorts of trouble, right? They called it Operation Bohan, Bohan, right? All of this fuss was because he said something about a banker which happened to be true, but for some reason, like, they get special treatment. Now, if you understand that the City of London Police has got no interest in looking after the public, even though they've got jurisdiction all around the country, they serve the banking interests, right? They want to keep the City of London a lean, mean, terrorism financing, eugenics funding, you know, pharmaceutical industry, oil industry, weapons industry, military industrial contractor industry. They want to keep all these things going And the only way they can keep them going is that if there's anything that disrupts that, the police come in and they'll fuck you around so much that you'll never be able to disrupt it. That's the whole point of the City of London Police. They've got no interest in the benefit of the public in England. They're not even got any interest in the establishment of England. It's the banking interest of the City of London. That's the way it works. So basically, they caused Ian loads and loads and loads of problems. I spoke to him about a couple of times now. This Ian, they perjured themselves in court. They've been caught doing it. But funnily enough, the judge didn't hold these police in contempt of court. This Ian's not vindictive enough for his own good, I don't believe. But anyway, I don't know him well, but that's my feeling. He should have pushed that because they all committed perjury against him. They got caught bang to rights doing it. Turns out one of the City of London policemen, when he went to the trial, the last trial, he started talking about his experience in Ian's house, right, when he'd done the initial raid. And he just remembered halfway through this, his kind of testimony in court like that he'd been around the house, and he said, "Oh yeah, I forgot that I found a massive load of cocaine around there." This is going back a few years. And they said, "Oh right," and he said, and I also found lots of other things, which are the kind of things you found around big drug dealers' houses. And they said, "Like what?" And he said, "Well, I found like a big fancy art picture on the wall. I believe it was a Damien Hirst." Turns out, when they'd raided his house for no good reason, when they'd raided his house, he hadn't bought that painting yet. Yeah, a few years later, or a couple of years later, he found a bug in his house. His computers, there was a burglary, all his stuff got stolen. And at that time, there had been the painting in the house. So basically, this fucking imbecile from the City of London Police burgled him. Quite clearly, he's burgled him because there's no other reason why he's been around his house. And he's gone and admitted it in open court. But of course, it's not funny because they've done absolutely nothing about it. Now, Ian's advice to me was, when you're dealing with these scum, you've got to make sure everything is on the internet, because these people, they basically spend their whole time bullying, anyone who crosses them or their paymasters. And as soon as it goes on the internet, then they just become like cowardly little sheep, because that's what they are. Cowards bully people. Straight down the line, people don't need to bully people. They don't need to perjure. Why on earth would you purge yourself in court, you would ask? Why on earth would you do it? What vested interest they got? I can tell you what the vested interest is. These people have a similar situation to arms companies. So, for instance, or a pharmaceutical firm, you'll work on a panel allowing a certain medicine in, and then you'll get a job for the drugs company that tried to push that through. That's the way it works. You'll go and work regulating mining in Africa, and you let a few deals through, and next thing you get a consultancy job for the mining company. You work in fisheries protection, probably. You sort of give someone some snide deal. The next thing you get a consultancy job. Consultancy job, you don't do anything. You just get paid a couple of grand a day for doing absolutely nothing. That's how they work. So that's how it works. So when you say what on earth could these people possibly get out of it, that's what they get out of it. There's a rotating door between the two industries, the public sector regulatory industry and the then private sector, and they both spin around, and they're just like one homogeneous mass of bullshit, and the spin that comes out confuses people into thinking there's genuine regulation. There isn't. Now, with the people who work for, say, the City of London Police, once they've done all this financial crime investigation work, they can get jobs doing sort of fraud compliance and also helping people do fraud. So, for instance, most of the people I believe who work for the Serious Fraud Office aren't actually actual coppers, but they're civilian police workers. Like in Scotland Yard, most of the people in there aren't police; they're just civilian workers doing paperwork and stuff. There might be accountants, stuff like that. Now, for instance, so you've got private security firms like Kroll. Now, when Ian Puddick was getting victimised and bullied at great expense to the taxpayer, Kroll were actually contracted to do lots of the snide work on them, and also it was Kroll who managed to get meetings with some of the top and this is all being revealed, so there's obviously lots of other stuff going on. They managed to instantly get meetings with the top people in the City of London Police to see what they were going to do to fit this in up. Now, I forget which police force it was, but it's one of the home counties. The guy who was the subject of this, the friend of the City of London Police who pushed this, he was a big reinsurance broker, one of the highest earners in the country he was, and he'd initially gone to his his own police force in his local area and said that it was criminal harassment. They said it's definitely not criminal harassment. It might be defamation, possibly, from what you're saying, if it's not true. But it's definitely not a police matter. It's a civil matter. He had a letter to this effect. So then he went to Kroll, and he managed to get Kroll to speak to people at the top of the City of London Police. They immediately took it on, and then they set about trying to fit the guy up. So this is the kind of filth that you're paying for with your taxpayers' money right now. With this particular instance there, you've got Kroll. Now, Kroll's a very famous private security firm. I think they're one of the biggest ones in the world. Now, they were the ones who famously were doing the security in inverted commas on 9/11 when the Twin Towers got blown up. They didn't used to do it, but just before it got blown up, they had to get an insider crowd to come in. So obviously it's Freemasons built the Twin Towers. All the Freemasonic company. If you've been in the City of London Police and you do your bidding so far as the people who run Kroll are concerned, you'll get a good job in Kroll, you get paid lots of money. Going on from that though, if you work for the City of London Police and you get, you kind of all your little like tickets for doing, or whatever they call it, for doing detective work, you can get good works for working as consultants for sort of all sorts of anti-fraud type, compliance type stuff. And for instance, if you work for the Serious Fraud Office, you can also get lots of good jobs for firms dealing with big public sector jobs to sort of stop corruption. Obviously, that's how it works. So for instance, in the Aston Lloyd context, I had Tony Dobinson of the City of London Police as a detective. He was telling me that he wasn't going to speak to anyone at RE10 who were the bent insolvency practitioners, because as I said, you've got the main company, you've got the functions around it, which are marketing, the legal side, and the accountancy side. But you've also, if you look at that as like a kind of comet going through the air, you've also got the thing trailing behind it, which is the insolvency procedure, which seeks to cut off the various different timelines and make it impossible for people, well, not impossible, but impossible for people who aren't just like going, that's all bollocks, what about that? They put all this swarf, like an aeroplane going by, and they shoot a rocket at it, and it shoots this stuff out, and people get distracted by all this stuff because there's an insolvency procedure going, and then they can't actually get to the actual aeroplane that's shooting off with their money. That's the way the insolvency procedure worked. Now, one of the people who worked for them was called Adam Stevens, Stevens with PH, not a V. And this Adam Stevens was working there. He used to work for the Serious Fraud Office, and Tony Dobinson told me, he said, I'm not even going to go and talk to them because they used to work for us, right? And it's like, now he blurted that out. He wouldn't normally have blurted it out, but the point was, I was sitting there very calmly and just sort of like knocking back all of the ridiculous things he kept saying. And one of the things that police will do, this is another thing you've got to watch out for, is they are trained in kind of like victim management or something like that. Basically, I've heard it off coppers before, is that if you go in and you start causing them a problem, or even if you haven't caused them a problem, they always throw in occasional like trick questions. So it's like, let's say you've been beaten up. They'll try and sort of start building a case against you. So just in case something doesn't really go quite right, they will start saying, right, we're going to charge you with assault, even though you were assaulted. It's the same way. So the way it works is that he'll say things to you to sort of try and make you like, not to that extent, but what they'll do is they'll start saying things to you like, what is anybody thinking about taking the law into their own hands? And you go, well, probably lots of people, but I don't think it's a very good idea because I intend to make you do your job, and I've got the evidence, so you're going to have to do your job. And they're like, and they don't like that, because you see what they're trying to do is they're trying to make you think, yeah. They want you to sort of say something with bravado to say, and they go, oh, you're not allowed to do that, and then they can start going, oh, you're a criminal sort of thing. It's the same old bollocks, right? Yet, of course, with the average nature of your average policeman, they're all like roughy tufty. If you say anything about them, they're all sort of going, oh, I'll do this, I'll do that. They wouldn't do anything, but they try to. But it's their mentality. They try and like egg you on to say something you shouldn't say. But the other thing they do is they constantly go on, oh, poor you, poor you, poor you. And it's like, look, I didn't come here for sympathy. I came here to tell you to look at this evidence. This is unequivocal evidence of fraud, documentary evidence. I know about this, from my qualifications and my work. I know this is definitely not right. It can't make any sense. Look at this. Then they start coming out with even more ridiculous things. Like they go, well, it's not just the evidence. It's where the evidence came from. And you're like, what, are you saying that I'm giving you false evidence? Does this not prove what I'm saying it proves? And they'll say, oh, no, it's not what it proves. It's like it could be seen as biased because it comes from you. I'm saying, look, this is some information I've got that I've found which proves fraud. And they'll say, oh, no, well, that's not how it works. It's more complicated. Then the cheeky bastard starts going on about corpus delicti and mens rea. Corpus delicti means body of the crime, and mens rea means like mental intent. So like he says you start going about how to have criminal intent. Now, if you look at the Theft Act, right, you don't even have to prove that the person is stealing the thing for them. And the Theft Act does cover anything, so it covers fraud as well. You don't have to prove that, say, if I steal something, and you don't even have to prove I'm stealing it for me or helping stealing it for me for my own benefit. It could be for someone else, and I'm still guilty of fraud. And this thing about mens rea, like you have to have criminal intent for theft, that doesn't count. If you've taken something, well, I mean, if you've sort of like picked up a blade of grass and it was accidentally made out of gold and someone's dropped it on the floor and you thought it was a blade of, like you could possibly say, well, I didn't even realise, I just, like something fell into my bag and I didn't realise it was expensive. It's possible, but you basically don't have to prove that. So they just give you this like barrage of lies, and it's quite difficult to put up with it because, you have to just go in and you sit there with them with a straight face having to take all this nonsense. But as I said, one of the main things that the police will tell you is they'll say, oh, you're just blaming everyone for it. You're blaming everyone. You go, yes, I am blaming them because there's evidence, unequivocal evidence of fraud. Look, I can prove this. This person has signed off books which are fraudulent. This person has not done any of the things they're meant to do. They tricked us into doing this thing. They've done it several times before. This solicitors are in bed with them. Of course they're bent. And they'll just go, no. Because what they want you to do is they want you to get behind this idea of a big Bin Laden figure who everything in the world is all revolving around this little linchpin, and you're just going to go for him. And you see, this is the way it works. And then they throw all their resources at going from somebody who's put all these levels of detachment in front of himself. And they'll go, no, we're going to go for him. We think we're going to get him. And these idiots don't go, how? How are you going to get him? They go, oh, it's a secret. And it's just, they string them along and they go along with it and go along with it and go along with it like little kids. But you see, this is the point, as I said, it takes quite a long time to explain because you have to explain it bit by bit. And, eventually, though, it all starts making sense. So from day one, I knew the police would be involved. I knew this anyway, but when your friend just tells you that's exactly what will happen, and then he explains everything, how it will happen, exactly how it happens, and he says, look, you'll lose everything unless you get stuck in, but if you get stuck in, you could do very well out of it. Now, I don't know if I'm going to do very well out of it or not, but the one thing I am absolutely sure about is that I'm not going to allow a load of thieves to just blatantly steal daylight robbery from me with all the evidence in the world to show exactly what they've done. And the police just going along saying fraud's complicated. I'm not questioning them. They used to work for us. I'm not questioning them. They work in an office. These are all Tony Dobinson specials. And the other one saying we don't like your attitude. It's like like if you're a milkman and you don't like someone's attitude, do you deliver the milk to them or not? Yeah, of course you do, because you're a milkman. The police seem to think that they've got this kind of option of saying we don't like your attitude, and they always come out with this attitude bullshit when they've been a complete cunt to you for about 3 hours and you've had enough of them, and they just start like contradicting themselves, and you sit there looking at them going saying, can you please explain that? We don't like your attitude. It's like this is the level of the country's gone to. There's no accountability for anything anymore. Anyway, I'll make more videos, but I know it took quite a long time to explain these things, but that's just the way it is. Hopefully you've followed. I've probably missed lots of stuff out as well. I've probably said lots of stuff I didn't need to say. But there you have it. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.